in our legal experts now. Sara Azari, I'm going to start with you. Why do you think the prosecution wasn't able to prove its case?
Good to be with you, Pamela. Yeah, the prosecution was not able to prove its case beyond a reasonable doubt, which is really the highest standard in our in our judicial system, because the prosecution was, number one, not able to poke the holes in Kyle Rittenhouse's testimony, and that's really what the defense turned on, and also they weren't able to show that his response to each of these men, to each of these sets of threats, was unreasonable. In other words, when the jury came back a couple days ago and watched the videos, I think half a dozen videos frame by frame, they were looking to see whether Kyle did something to provoke the threat and whether his response to that threat was reasonable in terms of using deadly force. And they agreed with the defense that it was. In other words, the evidence was very clear that each time Kyle Rittenhouse shot at each of these men, that he was facing imminent danger of great bodily harm or death, and that he had not provoked that threat. So I think this is absolutely the just result. I've been doing this for almost 20 years, doing criminal trials, and not based on politics and emotions, but just based on the law and the facts. This was 100% warranted, Pam.
Charles Coleman, do you agree? I mean, you're a former state prosecutor.
Well, I wouldn't say that it was a just result, but I would agree with Sara in as much as if you watched the trial from beginning to end and you saw how things unfolded, it's very difficult to disagree with the actual verdict that the jurors came to. I think that there are a lot of emotions, and the reaction to the verdict represents a huge divide in terms of where we are. But in terms of the jury and the people who watched that trial unfold, there's very little argument that can be made. What this came down to is ultimately, did you believe the prosecution's narrative around provocation, in as much as Rittenhouse was the one who started it and should not be able to claim self-defense and that his actions were not reasonable? Or do you believe the narrative that the defense put forward, which was essentially Kyle Rittenhouse was there to help and his intention was honorable up and until he felt like his life was threatened by a situation that he was in and he had no other recourse but to actually pull the trigger in defense of his own life? Ultimately, what it appears is that the jury decided that they believed the self-defense narrative much more than they believed the provocation, and that's why Kyle Rittenhouse right now is a free man, despite however many may feel about it.
And Sara, Rittenhouse testified in his own defense, which was considered something of a surprise. How important did that turn out to be?
It was the entire case, Pamela. We rarely put our clients on the stand because, like, for instance, looking at the Arbery trial, we saw what happened with McMichaels. It's very dangerous. But with a defense of self-defense, you almost always have to let the client tell the story. They're the ones who can best say they were in fear for their life, why they used the force that they used, what exactly happened that led up to the shooting or the killing, whatever the issue is. So it is almost always necessary, and I think that in this case, it was the entire defense. And to Charles's point, it was very interesting that this jury viewed provocation very narrowly. In other words, it wasn't enough that this 17-year-old kid came to Kenosha with a gun strapped to him and bad intentions. They were looking for specific acts by him that then brought about the threat that he responded to. So again, I think this was, Kyle's testimony was necessary. It is what the entire defense turned on.
I'm wondering, Charles, you point out his age, Sara, 17-year-old, now 18. Do you think his age played any role in the verdict, the fact that he was so young?
Well, Pamela, I don't necessarily think that it's just his age. I think we have to be very clear about what that means. I think that what we have seen throughout the course of this trial, be it from the judge, be it from right-wing media, be it from the public in many cases, we've seen a consistent infantilization of Kyle Rittenhouse in front of the public. And I think part of that was strategic by the defense, the way that he presented on the stand, the way that he presented in court, to remind the jury that he was young. But in terms of his age, I want to be very clear about something. We've seen many instances where people who were not like Kyle Rittenhouse, and I am referring to race in this instance, took the stand. I'm referring to the exonerated 5 in New York, York, also known as the Central Park Five, where they were not treated with the same delicacy and shielded by their age. And so there is a certain level of privilege that we have to acknowledge when you talk about how age played a role. I do believe that age was a factor. However, I think that it was amplified by the fact that he enjoyed the privilege of being infantilized, and I think that that also may have resonated with the jury as well.
Charles Coleman, Sara Azari, out of time, but thank you so much for that discussion.